How do we unlearn toxic behaviors? We all long to be the most authentic expression of our highest potential self, but we often end up with all of these toxic behaviors like poor communication, bad habits, out of control emotions that really get in the way. So how do we move beyond them so they don't get in the way of our most empowered, authentic expression? It may not always be easy, but it's definitely simpler than you think. Welcome, I'm Kim Marie, and this channel is all about supporting women to become their most empowered self so that they can live their most fulfilling life. Today, we want to dive into how to unlearn toxic behavior. So we're going to take a look at what is toxic behavior, what keeps us from overcoming toxic behavior, what causes toxic behavior, and ultimately some steps we can take to move beyond toxic behavior. So first we need to define toxic behavior. So what exactly does it mean to be toxic? Well, the word toxic ultimately means poison. So anything we do that on some level is poison to ourselves, to the earth, to others is toxic behavior, right? How we show up makes a difference. And toxic behavior has become so pervasive. And yet I can say that we also have a certain amount of kind of defining almost everything as toxic behavior. One of the most toxic ways that we can show up is in very insidious ways. You know, these kind of hard to detect people that will make certain comments or do certain things, but they won't actually speak it. They won't actually go out of their way to be particularly in your face. So it's really hard sometimes to think of it as toxic because we might not be able to see the behavior as downright demeaning or, harmful or hurtful in a direct way. But part of what we need to look for in the concept of toxic behavior is all the ways that it can show up in a very insidious way. Now, we also have lots of things. It could be very direct, like yelling. We're yelling at our children or yelling at someone else or really kind of being snippy. It can be a little bit more indirect, sort of the eye rolling, right? This kind of whatever, I don't care what you're saying, or maybe we just zone out and we kind of end up in this mode of barely listening and we don't engage with the person. Maybe our communication is really poor and passive aggressive. It could also be that our emotions are so out of control and all over the place that we're not mastering them or getting a handle on them. So this is what we're going to define as toxic and ultimately toxic behavior. So what causes toxic behavior? What causes us to behave in these toxic ways? Well, first of all, it's very learned. We are living in a culture that is extremely full of toxic behavior. We have this constantly in our face all the time, and we're learning it from parents, from teachers, from coaches, from peers, from organizations, and the way that things are represented in the world. And of course, some of our biggest leaders. There's a lot of toxic behavior going on. So we learn this through these various avenues. This is part of what causes it. We also live in a patriarchal dominance culture, and that doesn't help, right? Patriarchal dominance culture is in itself toxic in the sense that if we're talking about toxicity being poison, patriarchal dominance has an excessive, unhealthy level of masculine qualities without a balance of healthy feminine qualities or healthy masculine qualities. And that's what we're looking at right now. And whenever anything is unhealthy, it often can become like a poison to others, right? Or if it's unhealthy for us, it's probably poison toward us or toxic toward us. So this is how we end up learning and adopting these kinds of toxic behaviors. We have so much addiction in our life. We're kind of withdrawing. We're not connecting to what really matters. We're not remembering who we really are. These are critical points that we need in order to find that sense of balance and that sense of connection that helps us to create health, to create wellness, to detoxify. And when we're in a society and a culture that doesn't allow for that, it makes it really difficult to find that sense of wellness. We're also very unaware of our subconscious. There's been all kinds of statistics out there that say, up to 90%, maybe even more, of our entire expression is coming out of our subconscious. And so we may exhibit toxic behavior based on things that are living in our subconscious that we're unaware of. So part of our task is ultimately to bring things to consciousness, but that's one more of the big causes of toxic behavior. Now, what are some of the barriers to unlearning toxic behavior? Well, first of all, we have culture. We've touched on that already. If culture kind of expects certain things to happen, or we're living in a situation where it almost feels like we have to be toxic in order to be heard or seen. Of course, it never actually has to, but we may feel that way in the culture that we're living in. Our culture can kind of perpetuate this toxic behavior. If we're constantly surrounded by toxic behavior, there's a certain amount of truth to the idea that our moods are contagious, our attitudes are contagious. We start picking up on that negativity. We start picking up on that experience. And it's also our environment, what we're surrounded by. If we're surrounded constantly by people always abusing substances and getting into addictive behavior, or stuck in victim mode, or any of that kind of thing, then we may well adopt some of that same cultural behavior, some of that same cultural attitude. So another thing that causes us to struggle to unlearn toxic behavior is this idea that I work with a lot with my coaching clients around fragmented parts of our soul. Now, this starts to speak to the concept of what's living in our subconscious. When we're traumatized, when we have had experiences that are extremely difficult to digest and integrate, our soul can fragment. We can become fragmented in these various parts of ourselves, and then there are these parts that are behaving in ways that ultimately are out of love for us. They're longing to protect us in some way, but they're not helping us to move forward. And in fact, they can present as being toxic in order to try to protect us. So that may be another reason that it's very difficult to overcome this, is because we have these fragments that are all acting in their own way, and we don't know how to regather them, reintegrate them, and reconnect with wholeness within ourselves. Another aspect that makes it really challenging, that becomes a barrier to overcoming and unlearning toxic behavior, is the concept of discomfort or fear. When we are exhibiting toxic behavior, a lot of times it's coming out as some kind of defense mechanism, right? So there's that protector mode. There might be that part of us that's behaving that way. But this concept of fear or discomfort makes us not want to let go of it. It makes us kind of want to keep our guard up. We are afraid of what might happen. We're afraid of having some kind of pain in our life, or some kind of rejection, or whatever it might be. And so we kind of keep our guard up through this toxic behavior, and that becomes a barrier to unlearning it. And a final barrier that I want to mention here today is that we often don't know how. We simply don't know how to unlearn toxic behavior, right? If this is how we've behaved, maybe how we've grown up, the culture we've been indoctrinated into, how do we go about doing things differently? Well, that's part of what this next piece is about, which is how do we? What are some of the steps that we can take to unlearn toxic behavior? We want to start learning empowering behavior and unlearn toxic behavior starting today. So that's what I want to offer you here, is some basic quick tips to set you forward immediately, so we can start really moving toward this path of empowerment. We want to start with attention to self-harm. If toxic behavior is poison, in other words, it harms people, right? And maybe even creates a certain amount of bad karma to ultimately come back on yourself. What we want to think about is the understanding that hurt people hurt people. We don't do these things out of nowhere. It doesn't come out of nowhere. There is a defense mechanism often. There's something going on where there's a lashing out, maybe out of being hurt. So if we want to overcome our toxic behavior, we have to look at where we're hurting ourselves or where we've been hurt, and the healing needs to happen. And we can take lots of different steps toward healing. That's partly what coaching is about, or therapy, or group programs, or even tools like journaling and other beautiful expressions that can help us find healing around the harm that has been done to us. Next, we want to name the pain. So if we notice that we're feeling hurt, what is the pain? What's going on? Is the pain a loss? Is the pain a burden or some kind of overwhelm or some kind of excess responsibility or burnout? What exactly is going on that is the pain that we're feeling that perhaps generates that toxic behavior? So if we go into a situation where we're basically giving in to a bad habit that we know doesn't work for us, maybe it's that daily glass of wine or beer at the end of the day that we really wish we could give up, but we don't. And we know that it's not good for us. We know that it's not helping us, but we keep going back to it. Ask yourself, what is the pain? We need to name the pain. What is it that you're feeling that causes you to really feel you need that vice, that escape, that addiction, that bad habit that is toxic for you? So naming the pain is a really important step in moving out of and unlearning toxic behavior. Now, in order to unlearn toxic behavior, we have to be willing to move outside of our comfort zone. So another aspect, in addition to naming the pain, is that we want to define the fear, because inevitably all of us have a certain amount of fear to step outside of our comfort zone. And our comfort zone is what we do day to day, the daily things that we enact, the things that we keep relying upon, maybe certain escapes, certain behaviors, certain reactions, certain attitudes, certain assumptions, right? All of these can potentially be toxic in our lives, keeping us from where we want to go. So if we start to define what we're actually afraid of if we moved out of our comfort zone, that begins to help us take small baby steps to gently move out of it, to begin to step into a new direction. Maybe instead of reaching for that beer, we go for a walk. Right? We go do something else that helps calm our nervous system, keeps us in our body, allows us to feel the emotions, learn that emotional mastery so that we don't have the toxicity of out of control emotions. And slowly these things start to improve all on their own by taking one little step. Another thing that we can do to move out of toxic behavior is to begin to explore the extreme. Okay, what extremes are we going to? What are we holding on to? What are we attached to? A lot of times we feel like this is the only way I can do it. And so moving over here, which might be out of your comfort zone, is too scary, right? Because we're really attached. So we might begin to look at what are the things that we are feeling attached to and why, and begin to explore that differently. Now, I have a free download for you called my Balance and Empowerment Cards that help you look at these extremes and help you understand how to navigate extremes more effectively. So I invite you to download those. It's a totally free download. So check that out with the link in the description. The next thing you want to do to step out of and unlearn toxic behavior is to define your intentions. Why are you doing it? Why do you want to change your behavior? Why do you want to unlearn the toxicity? And really look at what are your intentions moving forward. If the intentions are strictly to beat yourself up and tell yourself how bad you are for having that toxic behavior in the first place, it's probably not going to help you. But if your intention is, okay, I learned this, I have some cultural imprints, I have some traumas, I have some fragmented aspects of my being, I understand now where some of my toxic behavior comes from, and I also understand I can choose and take action and steps to move out of it. And my intention is to do so that I become more empowered, so that I become a fuller expression of myself, so that my life becomes more fulfilling, so that I have better relationships with my children, my partner, etc. What are your noble intentions? Consider what your intentions are as you determine what you want to do to unlearn this toxic behavior. And finally, with all things that I talk about on this channel to moving into empowerment, and if we're going to unlearn toxic behavior, it's going to move us closer to empowerment. So what do we have to do? Practice. Everything is always about practice. We can't make changes without significantly, repeatedly, consistently, reliably changing our behaviors and patterns and thoughts and the way that we show up. So this is really, truly all about practicing these tools, practicing these steps so that we can truly unlearn toxic behavior. So be sure to download my balance and empowerment cards, like and subscribe, and let me know how you like this video. I can't wait to see you in the next one.